Let's see. We are live.
And we're here.
We're here. Alive with Joey, episode 6 with my boy, Nick Zei. Brother, such an honor. Excited to have you. Thank you.
It's great to be alive with Joey tonight on YouTube.
You did it. You did it.
Let's have a great conversation about some things.
Yeah, man. We'll see who's all hopping on. We got a few already. Let's see what the comments. Do you have your comments showing on your side? Oh. You should have it on the right-hand side. I don't have any yet, but
yes, I do. But I'll just I'll put it up on my phone, just so I can make sure I see them. But anyways, how are you today, brother?
Today's been a really good day. I just got back from, we're in Costa Rica, so we just did Sunset and burgers with my mom. Who's here for like a couple more days. So we grabbed burgers and went to Sunset and played in the ocean with the kids. I can complain if I wanted to, but I think it'd be ridiculous. It was a good day.
Man, that sounds beautiful. Yeah. That sounds really nice right about now. I'm in Tennessee and sometimes it's really cold. It's nice here recently, but man, the water.
The water's my thing.
Yeah.
So should we wait till a few more get on, and then dive into because we're going deep. I know we're going deep tonight.
Let's just get into it, man. You tell me where you want to get into.
Okay, talk about it. Tell me a little bit about, let's tell my viewers a little bit about yourself and kind of where you're at, what you're doing. Let's start with that.
Fair enough. All right. I'm Nick Zei, and I talk about things online. Mm-hmm. And I do that with the intention to help others to understand and awaken to more of what's happening in the world and to realize the self that lies beneath the conditioning. And I do that in a lot of different ways. And a lot of the times what I talk about isn't even related to that. It's more about what is reality. So I do my best to balance what's going on in the, I guess you could say, science area. And I'm really doing my best to bring science and spirituality together, because I believe that when you empower them both, when you use both of these together, just as Nikola Tesla said, he said that once science begins to understand non-physical phenomena, you'll make more of an advance than you have basically in human history. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help people to see that and having some fun along the way, kind of.
Dude, I love it.
That's my goal.
I love it because, and man, the last little while, we talked about this earlier, is how much I've been pushed to like slap my ego around a little bit and say, look, you can dive into the science, Joey. You can look into the science part and bring things together instead of just being so, I love the magic. I love the esoteric. I love the metaphysical. I love all that magic stuff. But there is such a marriage there with the two. And I love how you bring everything to I guess to screen, but to your viewers. You're one of my favorites for sure when it comes on just explaining things, because man, bringing both together, I think would be a lot nicer than having one just being the woo woo and one being the science and attacking each other, because we've seen a lot of that.
I mean, I get my fair share of backlash, and anybody who breaks the paradigm of society is going to get that. And one thing I realized early on was that people aren't going to like you no matter what you do. Somebody's not going to have something to say. So I might as well just go ahead and talk about what I want to talk about, because when I do, then I actually feel fulfilled and I feel like I'm doing what I want to do. And so thanks, man. I appreciate that. And likewise, I really enjoy what you're doing as well. And I'm just happy to be here and to get into some different stuff in whatever area we get into today.
I was telling a friend of mine, I was just diving into the law of one after you spoke about it a little bit. You talk a lot about it on your content. I had no idea what the law of one is. I still don't really know. But I went into a video and for 4 minutes and I'm like, oh. So let's start there. I know that's kind of one of your areas of expertise. What is the law of one? If you would just kind of give us a rundown of what the law of one is.
All right, that's a question, because there's so many different ways you could go with it. But I just want to say, as like a precursor to this conversation, is that I don't know anything. What I do my best to do is just to understand the evidence of what could be and what might be. And when there's enough convincing evidence, I would say that I don't believe that it's that way, but I would say, it's probably this way. But given other evidence, I would say otherwise. So that's one thing that I really like about the law of one, is that It's very simple yet very complex, and I do believe it's our best shot right now to understanding what's happening in reality from the micro to macro. And what it is essentially the law of one is a thing that was channeled in the 1980s, and that's a long time ago in terms of technological advancements, but in our human history it's really not. So with the law of one, it's a lot of people just off the beginning will say, and I had to go through this myself because I came from a very logical scientific background, and a lot of people have problems with, or a lot of the scientific community will have a issue with channeled works. And I've come to the conclusion after having so many dark nights of the soul about, do I want to talk about the law of one? Because it's not necessarily scientific and you can't prove it. And I'm like, everything is a leap of faith in reality.
Yeah.
So whether it's the Bible, whether it's the Quran, whether it's any book, anything you really take in is a leap of faith. So I'm like, does this book actually help me to live a more fulfilled and harmonic life with others and with reality? And it does. So that's kind of how I just was led to it. And I have been studying the law of one probably for about 3 to 4 years now, on and off. And every time that I go away from it, it just comes back into my life. It circles
back in.
It circles back in. And I find myself just getting something new every time. It's so deep. And that's what I really like about it, because a lot of times things will be surface level. A lot of times in spirituality, it will be surface level, like positive vibrations, these things. But then you get into this and you're like, it's so incredibly profound, but yet it's very simple to understand when you look at the basics of it. So there's so many different things you could talk about with it. So it just really depends on, where you want to go from there.
So what I saw is, and this is kind of basic stuff, is there's one creator, and that one creator is expressed through basically us and everything else. Mm-hmm. And then also I read that everything is love and light, and then everything that's happening is in service to that exploration. Mm-hmm. So
can you hit me one at a time? Because I have a different answer for each one of those.
So let's start with the first, like one creator being expressed through us or everything, I guess. Yeah. So start with that and your breakdown on that.
So this isn't from the law of one, but this is just something that kind of came to me. I see reality, and the law of one does confirm this, but it doesn't say it like this. Everything is unity, and there's different levels of unity. And in the law of one, they refer to those as densities. And densities and dimensions a lot of the times are correlated in the way people think they are, but I do think there are some differences that a lot of people really don't realize. But we'll get into that later. More about when it comes to everything being the creator, I would imagine that I'm asking myself, do I want to talk about creation itself because it has its own creation story and how everything was created, or do I want to go into how everything is? And I think the easiest way, let's just say this, easiest way to understand it would be that our universe is a magnet in a sense. And when you're inside of the universe, you have expanding and contracting forces, because there has to be some sort of expanding and contracting for anything to exist in a form. And you could think about that as levels of densities of vibration, or you could think about that as levels of unity, or you can think about that as just an A and B force, kind of like the yin and the yang. They need each other in order to exist, because when you have that perfect balance, it's like certain planets have certain amount of gravity. Well, how does it have that? Well, it's the expanding and it's the contracting. Or if you ask Walter Russell, it's the spiraling. Spiraling creates gravity, which is a whole different. He is just in himself a genius. And he was around, if you don't know who Walter Russell is, he was around and he was friends with Nikola Tesla. And he has a book called Secrets of Light that's also pretty good. That one is further out than the law of one, in my opinion. But that's a whole nother podcast. But the law of one in itself, I would say we are all experiencing in the third density. That's what a lot of people think third dimension is.
Okay.
We're experiencing positive and negative, but when we step outside of it, it's all one magnet, just two forces that are doing opposite things. But at some point along our journey, and in the law of one that says that in the sixth density, the negative path ends. So the negative is real, and there really is negative entities. relatively to the third density. But when you get to sixth density, you cannot progress unless you basically drop your polarity. And ironically, when you drop your polarity, you have only love, only intelligent infinity. So it's the way that I would see the good and bad paradigm would see that there's love, and then there's what we call negative, but really it's just less love. So as we go up, we realize that it basically switches polarity, but it's all love or light or intelligent infinity, as that's what the law of one would say. So
when you said remove yourself from the third density, and how did you put that? You said kind of see yourself. Where would you be by just watching that instead of being in the third density? Where would you be by, let's say, observing?
Okay. Yeah, this is a really good question, because this is a very subtle hint that a lot of people don't realize the law of one talks about. And this is something that I talked about in previous videos. I've done TikToks about this. There's something called time space, and there's something called space time. Okay. So for all the people that asked me for a breakdown, a longer video, this is your longer video for now, because a lot of people asked me and I haven't done it yet. Imagine that the universe is two halves that are overlapped upon each other like this. It's not as though a lot of people, when you say that, they think it's like this.
Sure.
But no, they're like this. They're directly on top of each other. This is from the physics model of Dewey Larson. And as I explain this, I want you to understand that the law of one literally confirmed. They were asked in the law of one, is Dewey Larson's physics correct? And they said, yes, it is correct. So it's actually got a professional endorsement by the law of one itself.
I love it.
Which is really interesting. All right. And so that's kind of how I came across Dewey Larson in time space. So when you're observing, let's say you're going from, let's say space-time is this.
Sure.
Okay. And this gets into geometry, and that's a whole nother thing. But imagine that if you know what the Platonic solids are, the Platonic solids are basically what Plato said is the structure of the universe. It's the dodecahedron. You have all the octahedron. There's basically 6 of them. And imagine that they go inside of each other, literally. Okay, this is how you can understand what space-time and time-space is, and it actually makes sense, or hopefully it makes sense. Again,
we're gonna
where you're at.
Nick, we're gonna have you on a few times, man. I'm gonna tell you that right off the hop. So let's just keep going here.
All right, it's so hard to explain it simply because it's complex at the same time. Imagine that literally, let's keep it as simple as I can for this episode, and we can get into it deeper later.
Perfect.
The solids go inside of each other, certain ones, and when you invert them, it creates time-space. And so when your molecules flip inside out, you basically have another existence in something called time-space. This is what the spirit world is. You have the physical world and the spirit world overlaid upon each other.
Right.
But when you bypass the speed of light, it's called unity in the Dewey-Larson reciprocal system is what it's called. And when you have over unity, is what it's called. When you go over the speed of light, it doesn't have to be speed, by the way, in terms of the way, like, we don't have to use a spaceship and pierce it like Star Wars.
Right.
It can be you vibrationally invert. And this is what is said, what happens when you might have out-of-body experiences.
Right.
You're inverting, and then you're in time-space.
Right.
And so when I say you are observing, you're outside of this realm, this is the same place, in my opinion, there's a lot of evidence to say, the work of Dolores Cannon and Dr. Michael Newton when they're talking about between lives. It's time-space. So when you're in time-space, you can look at incarnations, you can see everything. And also when I say when you can look at this from the outside the incarnated state, it could be in a higher density if you've graduated, if you're 50% or more in service to others, which is how you move on to the fourth density.
Interesting.
Which, by the way, we would be able to see all of the densities above us, but they choose to not be seen. That's why we can't see them, because they choose that. So that they don't disturb us, because this is where the action is. People think that the universe works. Well, when I go to school, 12th grade is the hardest. It's like, not chief, not in this universe. This one, what you're doing right now is the hardest. And it gets easier from here. So you're in the show. Like, this is, if you're going to try in your life, this is the life to give it a try, you know,
brother.
I realized at least.
I got to bring you in. I got to guide you into a hypnosis session with me one day, because the experiences that my clients have on a daily basis, and I work with a lot of evolved souls. I'm so fortunate to work with such evolved souls, and what we are able to experience in these sessions, like Dolores Cannon talks about it a lot. If you've researched Dolores, it blows me away every damn day. And so I wonder, is your vibration rising as we go into these deeper states of conscious, like in a hypnotic state? Does our vibration rise by shutting off the conscious mind? Like, what do you think is happening there? In order, because I have people go to densities that I didn't even know existed, experiences that they can't express. They like, I can't put into words what I'm feeling, seeing. I've never had this energy. I've never felt this love before. Like, this love is different than any love. Weeping, bawling, because it's just pure bliss without anything else. So I just document. I mean, I guide, but it's mind melting stuff, man.
Yeah. What was your question again?
I don't even know.
Oh, you said, what do I think is happening?
Yeah. Like, what do you think is happening for that to happen? Like,
so I think a lot of has to do with brainwave states. I think that there's, I don't know an easy way to describe this. Imagine that, see this hair tie here. Okay, let's see if I can get my face out of it. Imagine that this right now is your conscious mind. Outside of your conscious mind is another state of awareness, which is your subconscious, and it goes out even further to what we call the superconscious.
Right.
I would say, in order for you to be experiencing simultaneously time, space, and space-time, you would have to have some, it's basically, I think it's built in. I wouldn't say that, I don't know what's happening. And I think it's important to admit. I mean, I have no idea, but I would suggest it's probably something to do with when you shut off the conscious mind, maybe that kind of dials down the lower density kind of thing that's happening here.
Right.
And that's giving you access to something. It's like, let's keep it really simple. I would just imagine it as, what happens is that they built a cheat code into the game so that if humanity evolves enough, you're going to get to the point where it's really tough and you want to remember as a society. It's just like mushrooms or things like that, or DMT would be a cheat code in a sense. Right. It's just a different type. I would say hypnosis is kind of like that. It's just a bypass mechanism so that humanity can understand consciousness. So I don't really know the specifics of it, but it plays, I feel like it immensely has helped a lot of people for sure.
And what I find interesting is when I started diving into Dolores's work, the first book I read was Keepers of the Garden. Have you read it?
No, I've read Between Life and Death and the Convoluted Universe.
Okay. So I dove into this, and I see that Dolores is doing most of her work in the 80s and 90s. And I'm like, okay, this is a long time ago. A lot of from that book was 80s and 90s. I'm like, man, things have shifted so much. And with Dolores's work, a lot of the times, I mean, she would record this on a cassette recorder at the time, and her clients would replay them if they wanted to, and a lot of them would have zero recollection of this of the session. Now, not only just me, but I talk to other hypnotherapists, other people who are in the QHHT or beyond quantum healing. They use hypnosis to do what they do. Yeah. We're noticing that our clients are conscious through it all. They're 80% of my sessions, they remember, and they're in deep somnambulism. Like they're in a deep state of hypnosis, but they're able to basically be conscious and in the subconscious simultaneously. Where with Dolores, it was almost never happened. And it's not like her inductions were deeper; they went deeper than our people are. But what do you think happened there? Because my take, what I feel, what I've kind of received is that we've evolved past that. Now we can be both. The veil is kind of non-existent.
I mean, from a law of one perspective, it would be because The reasoning as to why that's happening would be because the planet is already in fourth density, but we are, I think it was in 1987, the harmonic convergence, that the planet literally moved into the fourth density. I don't know. Don't quote me on that.
Sure.
But I'm pretty sure the harmonic convergence had something to do with it, or the planet in general. It's just the master cycle. According to the law of one, there's a 75,000 year cycle in which you either learn your lessons or you don't. And if you don't,
yeah,
good luck. 75,000
everybody's
more
like,
years.
oh, I know, I'm hearing you.
Exactly. So if the planet is already evolved, we're catching up.
Yeah.
And if we're catching up, then I think it also has to do with the sun. I mean, I can get into things that I think a lot of people won't even be able to. Let's just say I'll save it for other episodes, because there's a whole other thing about the sacred geometry of the solar system, what's happening with the cycle, and
Cycles,
that there may potentially, we have some stuff with Proxima Centauri going on, and that there was a solar flare on December 2012 when a lot of people thought that, oh, there's going to be a solar flare on planet Earth. Nope, there was one on Proxima Centauri, our closest neighbor. And so there's some theories out there that say that we're actually again, to science people, my science colleagues that are going to get on this are going to be like, what are you saying? And
right.
I'm like, I'm just a theory. We're just talking about theories, right?
Right.
Relax, Barb. I see you. Okay. So there's some theories out there to say that the sacred geometry of the Merkaba and different things line up, and that the star system that we're in is it's not just the sun. I don't remember the specific name, but that there's two suns, okay. And that it's actually confirmed in the law of one that most star systems are binary star systems. There it is. That's the word I'm looking for. So it's 80%, and it's actually been confirmed in science that 80%, I believe, they confirmed this a while ago, like 3 or 4 years ago, that 80% of star systems are binary. And so a lot of the theory out there is saying, and again, I don't have the article off the top of my head, but I'm 90% sure. There's always that chance of error. But what I'm postulating here is that there's something to do with the sacred geometry of the binary star system, and that there's something going on here that we may not have full recollection of, or that may be being hidden for some reason. And there's reasoning behind that, and you probably all understand why things are being hidden. We don't even need to get into that, but I just think it's really fascinating that there might be some stuff going on here that we don't fully comprehend. And I think the law of one does a good job of just breaking that down. So anyways, to answer your question, it would probably be because the planet's moving into fourth. The vibration of the planet is in there, and it's waiting for us to catch up. Essentially, we're not waiting, but it's supporting.
Okay. So you said it moved into the fourth density in the 80s? Late 80s? Is that what you said?
Or, I'm pretty sure. Again, I don't remember off the top of my head because there's so many details. But at least when the law of one was written, we were already in fourth density. So it has to be at least the 80s.
Okay. And so from there, when the planet moves into that, the rest of us obviously takes a little while.
A little bit longer than some people would like.
Yeah, I'd say. So where do you think we are? Let's just take these last 10 years, 15 years, and even these last 2 years. Mm-hmm. What's happening? And we don't have to get political. We don't have to get like what's actually happening and this versus that. But what do you think when it comes to that, our vibration and society? What is your opinion on what's happening?
The maximum opportunity for karmic growth.
Ooh.
That's what's happening. Mm-hmm. Throughout our entire planet, whether or not people are happy with it, and I have not been happy with it myself, trust me.
Yeah.
But right now, it's such a polarizing time. The law of one also says that the good is getting gooder. It doesn't say it in these words, but the good is getting gooder, the positive is getting more positive, and the negative is getting more negative. And when that happens, inherently, it leads you somewhere. And another fascinating point, I'm just going to keep quoting the law of one because relevant things are coming up for me. Just anyone who's watching, a lot of the times you don't even realize, this is from the law of one, you don't even realize when you're already polarized positive until after you are. that you're already way on the positive path before you realize, I think I'm on the positive path.
Right.
And for those that are worried about being on the negative path, you're not going to get there unless you're doing some really sketchy things to people. Like, I'm talking like straight doing the nastiest things you could think of. Remember, 5% service to others, 95% service to self. Okay, we didn't even get into that, but let me just explain what I'm talking about. Okay, according to the law of one, you move on from third density to fourth density by being either 50% or more in service to others, or positive, or 95% or more in service to yourself, or negative. And the amount of people that have actually went negative in history is like a handful.
Wow.
So those are the nation leaders of the worst things that have happened to humanity. Those are the only ones. And the one that a lot of people think was really bad from the second war that we had didn't even make it. He wasn't even polarized enough to make it to service to self or negative, according to the law of one.
Right, according to the law of one.
And the reasoning they give is actually quite interesting, because he thought what he was doing was for the best interest of the world. He literally believed it. So that's why his polarization wasn't far enough, because he thought he was helping others. So that's why when people say, well, what service to others versus service to self? It's in your intention first and foremost.
So there's a few things I want to touch on. Number one, I think this is a really good lesson for people who feel like they've fallen off the wagon, or, aren't in alignment from, because we go through these journeys, these being ripped open moments in our lives, these dark nights of the souls, whatever, these rock bottoms. We get on this path, we start doing all the things that make us feel good, and then we kind of fall off. We're never really, like you said, we're still on that path. We're like you said too, is like we were on that path way before we realized, and we caught up to knowing. But let's go to intention, because you create what you believe, what you really believe. So negative and positive, or right or wrong, is subjective to what someone believes. So that opens up a whole other bag,
rabbit hole. Yeah.
Right. So tell me about that. Like, what is, because I was having a conversation with my mom, and I said, "What?" She was saying, "Oh, well, that person's weird. They're kind of crazy." And I'm like, "Well, to you, because you grew up this way, and you look at that like that's absolutely nuts. They grew up that way. That was completely normal. It's your perception." And she couldn't really wrap. Yeah, but it's still not right. Man, it's
wild.
It's wild.
Yeah. So, well, this is actually really interesting that you asked me this today, because I was writing about this in my upcoming book, this exact topic, because a lot of people, I made a video a couple of days ago that people were like, well, what is really service to self and service to others? Because I don't know if it is this or that. And I just want to remind people that it can be very simple. And a lot of the times when first off, I just want to address this comment before I get into this. I saw this is always the comment that people leave whenever you start talking about the law of one. And somebody said in the comments, leaving duality thinking. This is a really good educational moment, because when you don't actually understand the law of one and what it's saying, people are thinking, oh, that's in duality. It's just, I can't even talk about that because the nature of reality is non-dual. I actually made a video again today about this, where I said everything is simultaneously, depending on your perspective. In our realm, there is positive and negative from this experience, but everything is one. And that's the biggest teaching of the law of one. One of the first things that the law of one says is everything is one. There is no separation. There is only unity. And it says specifically, there is no separation, only identity. And identity is the key there, because identity is the thing that has us believe that we are separate from that. Now, the eternal nature of the one infinite creator is what Law of One calls it, is intelligent infinity. It is love, and it is unity. Unity itself is love. So when you say leaving duality thinking, when you're in the positive polarity, it is unity. So there's no, when you study the law of one, you realize there's no difference between duality and unity. Or no, wait, no, hold on. There's no difference between positive and unity, not duality, because positive is unity in its nature.
Right.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm clear on that, because there's a major difference between duality and unity. Again, it's the positive is, imagine it like this. Can there be in truth, when you're playing with electricity, let's say you're running electricity through a wire. Okay, you have a wire of electricity for your light. Is there such thing as, in our reality, is there such thing as no electricity, or the opposite of electricity? Now, you can say there's other things that are kind of things that stop electricity, but is there a true opposite to electricity? And this is one of the teachings from Dr. David Hawkins on enlightenment. So he said you need only one thing for enlightenment, and it's to understand that there is no opposite to hot. Let's take a different analogy. There's no opposite to hot. There's just less hot.
So like you said, with love and less love, it's not
exactly
right.
So what I'm saying here is that we think of it as duality because we're conditioned to believe good and bad, but really in the law of one, we're saying there is positive and negative, but negative in itself is still love. And if to make that make sense, a lot of people might be being like, make that make sense. And imagine it as though there is an electromagnetic wave that, when I say, let's just go back to the beginning. I said levels of unity, right? Imagine that those can be frequency, as Nikola Tesla said. If you want to understand the universe, think of energy, vibration, frequency, these things. Imagine that no matter how slow you get in the wave, it's still a wave.
Right.
That you can never reach absolute zero, and there can never be a straight zero.
Right.
So when we say negative, we're saying that it's a slower wave. But it's still a wave. It's just a different level. And that's why we think negative is separation.
So when you talked about identity and the law of one being all is love, would the opposite of identity just be ego? Like, is that two different identities? Like, if you're coming from a space of lack or a space of, what is that? Like, if there is no opposite, and
first off, I just got to say, I feel like I might have come on strong in the last couple minutes. Sometimes when I get into the law of one, I get really passionate about it. I'm like, this is what it means. I want you to understand this because it'll help you. And then I'm like, very serious. I am, in my nature, a very relaxed dude. But for some reason, when I get passionate, I get passionate. So don't mistake my passion for like, this is what it is. But identity in itself is ego.
Yeah.
That's essentially what it is. So when you identify as anything,
sure,
it would be, in a sense, ego, but that's the mind. And it's said that the universal mind is called, in the law of one, the logos, which is what the Bible calls the word. If you look at the original translations of the Bible, it's very, very, very similar to the creation given to us by law of one, just different wording. And that goes back to the different things like the Council of Nicaea with the Bible, and how the guy who was actually good at translating the Bible from Hebrew to English wasn't included. It was only certain people that were included in that translation, and that the Bible wasn't actually translated word for word. It was translated, and they changed the context of certain things. You can look that up. I'm not making that up.
Sure.
So if you change the context back and you look at the original text, you find that they say a lot of the same thing. That the law of one says the same thing as the Bible. And in the very beginning, they say the same thing, but not throughout the book, because as we probably understand, there's distortion in pretty much everything.
Of course.
So
how many times do you think the Bible was messed with?
How many times?
Yeah, like so let's go back to the beginning. Like you said, it's basically the law of one in the beginning.
Yeah.
How do we find the earliest version of that information? Like, is that even out there? Like, can you find?
Yeah, it's out there. You just got to look. I mean, a lot of information is hidden, but The Nag Hammadi library has a lot of the original translations of some of the Bible stuff.
What's that? What was that called again?
It's called the Nag Hammadi.
Nag
If you
Hammadi.
type it into Google and you spell it wrong, it'll correct you. Well, I don't use Google. I actually use DuckDuckGo, but
Yeah, so do I.
and I would make sure if you're looking these things up to use Brave on your as a browser and use DuckDuckGo. And it's only for like because you get different results. That's why. But anyways, how many times has it been changed? Thousands.
Yeah,
I would say thousands. It really depends on our most. It's King James, right? Is what people mostly are into these days. I mean, you can look. There's hundreds of translations, but
sure.
just because a translation was changed doesn't mean that it wasn't messed with more than a translation. So I feel like one thing to also understand about the Bible, such as the book of Revelation, let's say, is that a lot of the times when you're in, this is going to get into a whole rabbit hole.
We're here, man. Let's do it.
But in a book that a lot of people don't even know about, it's a book called Living the Law of One 101. The Choice is what it's called. Living Law. It's free. By the way, should have said this at the beginning. All the information on the Law of One, all the books on the Law of One, it's all free. It's all free. You can buy the hardcover, which I have back there, but you don't need to. I've bought it because I liked having a physical copy and being off technology and underlining and doing these things. But if you go to lawofone.info, you can get the book for free. You can look at each session. It's much easier to study the Law of One if you go to lawofone.info because you can categorize everything. You can look at the service to others, the archetypical mind. You can study all the different topics that you want, and they're all in one place. Because the problem with the Law of One for a lot of people is that it's Q&A format. So he might ask a question about one topic in session 2, and then in session 78, he goes over it again. So they're very far apart. So a lot of the times, you're not getting all the information in the same spots. But if you go to the website, you will. So that's if anyone wants to get deeper into this. But when was the Law of One written? It was written in the 1980s was when it was channeled. And it was done in my way, in the correct way. And it was done using a style of channeling that a lot of people don't use. A lot of people these days, I mean, there's not a lot of people that are telling people what's going on, but I would just have a lot of discernment for people that channel, especially nowadays, because a lot of people who are not spiritually advanced and haven't went through the dark nights will then mistake. Honestly, they're not saying they're bad people. They're not. And there's nothing wrong with them, but they don't know the difference between channeling and what they're channeling. First off. And also that can be negative beings or that can be their own ego. And they're just have discernment for that. And so to get back into the topic that I was going to talk about. In the book, The Law of One 101, The Choice, it talks about how when you are more positive, the more positive you get as a channel, because she was the one who channeled it. The lady, her name's Carla Ruckert. She was the actual channel, and then there was a scribe, and then there was a guy who was asking the questions. She wrote this book, then she left her body. She was going to write more, but that was it. So this is the only book we have from her. And she said in the book that when you become more positive, when you polarize more positive, the negative comes at you incredibly hard.
Oh, man.
All the time.
Oh, yes.
All the time. Okay. So if you're in that state where you're really polarizing positive, you just got to expect the things. And that can be through bots in your comment section on YouTube. That can be through literally anything to get at you. That you see, negative entities and positive both have the ability of telepathy. It's one of the main things in the fourth density. So when this happens, they know your weaknesses. So when those weaknesses come, they're going to come at you. So how does this wrap around all the way back to what we were talking about, the book of Revelation? This is just my own take on the Revelation. John didn't understand the difference between positive and negative entities and positive and negative visions. This is something that also in the Law of One, it talks about how Moses was an extremely positive being, extremely positive, but yet was contacted by basically you could say the archetypal villains of our solar system and the area that we're in, even of Earth. They call the negative entity group that is on the planet doing the things they're doing now, they call them the Orion group. They've been around.
Interesting. I've never heard them called that.
Yeah. So the Orion group has been around for a long, long time. Okay. And so it's actually said that the Orion group contacted Moses in this moment, and they distorted the teachings or the 10 commandments, and they were not even close to what they originally were supposed to be.
Right.
But it's because they were given to them by negative entities, and they couldn't understand. He couldn't understand being at the level of the evolution of humanity and what was going on. They couldn't discern. So he brought that back down, and it is what it is today. So when we talk about revelation and the world ending, this to me is the same case, that you can have this thing called a lower astral vision. It isn't as though what John was saying was false in its entirety. It was just false for our reality, because the things that happen in Revelation are things that will happen in lower astral planes. And this is what the Law of One refers to as subdensities. There are subdensities of the third density, an infinite amount of them. So in one of those lower astral planes, revelation will happen, but it's not something that will happen in our reality. And this is also something that Dr. Hawkins also confirmed in his work, that revelation was a lower astral vision. So I'm only saying that to just open your mind to think, well, it wasn't even just distorted in translation. It was distorted in the original translation that the people were getting from that. So what was in the original Bible, what could have possibly still been distorted, as just like anything. So I'm not saying that it was just humans messing it up in terms of in present day in translations. I'm saying other things.
This hole's deep. This hole is deep.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So okay. I'm just saying that we don't even know if the original message was true. And here's let's end that on a positive note, that thought. Okay. So there is a man named Neil Donald Walsh who wrote the book. Conversations with God.
Yeah.
And it was said that, not in the Law of One, but if you just look around, and there's a lot of evidence to show that he got the original translation, and he called the 10 Commandments in his book the 10 Commitments. And so if you read the Conversation with God, you can look up the 10 Commitments, and you can see what the 10 Commandments were originally going to be. And it's beautiful. And it's actually a thing where instead of it being like, don't do this, it's when you commit to God, you will not want to do this. When you commit to God, this is what you will be like, which is very different from telling people don't do this. Because we all know what happened when we were kids and we were told not to do things, man. We just did them.
Dude, I got 2 kids. Don't do stuff. You kidding me? Like, yeah, but it's true. Right? Even now, right? No one likes to be told you can't do something. You're not. Don't do that. No. But I get it. When you do commit to yourself, the extension of God, and you're not going to want to do those things. And look how much you've evolved. And because we haven't really chatted about that, but we're going to dive into your little dark night and how you got here. Because we're open, raw, and vulnerable.
Enough, whatever you want, I'm sure we'll do plenty more. So whatever,
man. But like, look at how much you don't want to do anymore. Look at the stuff you used to love to do or thrive on, or whether it's, for me, it's the partying, it's the drugs, it's the drinking, it's the that, and look how much you evolve as you, and just to not want to do that kind of stuff anymore. Whatever it is, it's different for everyone. But
for me, it was video games. I was actually repressive with my anxiety, and a lot of people are reactive and they want to go out and they want to do things.
Yeah.
And for me, I would say probably until about 4 or 5 years ago now, I was playing, like, that was my thing. I didn't really go out, didn't party, didn't struggle with alcohol, never smoked because my dad had smoked, and it was like, I'm never going to touch a cigarette, and I never have. I've touched a cigar, but not a cigarette. Yeah, I really struggled with breaking out of that world. But I feel like video games, a lot of people who haven't played video games will be like, they're a waste of time. Oh, they're this. They're actually, it's one of the best ways. And nowadays, I feel like for people to get introduced to concepts that are beyond what our reality says. Because, like, for example, there's negative forces that are trying to distort movies to say certain things. And there's some people in the spiritual community that will say, don't watch any movies, don't watch any TV. It's all whatever it is. It's all distorted. But I'm actually like, no, I don't agree with you, because when you watch Star Wars, it might have some things in it, but it's still like, oh my, there could be more than what I realized. When I watched Spider-Man, the last Spider-Man, I'm like, let's go, dude. Like, this is breaking me open. And I just want to say how much disclosure is going to be in these movies, especially Marvel movies, is disclosure. And in the next Doctor Strange movie, there's going to be an incredible amount of disclosure on multiverse, and I'm sure.
Okay, why? Why is that happening? Why are we getting those messages through that?
Evolution of consciousness. There's not just all bad. It's not just all bad. Even if there are people at the top that are bad, it doesn't mean that the people that are doing the movies are bad, and they actually want to throw in some things that will help people out. The negative is not smart. The negative is just all they know. If you want to understand negative, all they know is force. I'm just going to keep coming at you. They don't know how to play defense. All they know how to play it. Just play it. So when they're so focused on that, we can start to get value even from these things. That's why, again, I don't agree, because you can get so much value from watching some of these shows. I would say, of course, there's straight distortion ones like Independence Day and all of these, which are, that are just like the world ending. Yes. I mean, obviously you probably don't want to watch that, but in the ones that are more fantasy related. And so in terms of my own journey with video games, that's really what it was. I mean, it was more of a, like, this is where I want to live. This is what I want to do. I played a lot of, for those that are into video games, growing up, I played when I was, a teenager, I was playing World of Warcraft, and World of Warcraft was it's literally like, have you played it?
No, but I know friends who were, I mean, that was life.
That's what I'm saying. That's where I was, man.
Yeah.
And it's, there was a lot of things that I didn't get into anything very crazy because I was always at home playing, but I think it was not so far out of my paradigm being in that realm where you had different spells and different things that were like next level humanity.
Right.
It was like, I'm already there. So when people say that kids are getting, having all this distortion, I'm like, yeah, but it's going to be a lot easier for these kids to contemplate these topics because they're not distorted by classically religion. Has been the distortion, and it stops people from exploring these topics because that's not happening as much anymore. So that these new kids coming in are going to be much more adept to be like, maybe there is some truth to this because I've been playing it every day in a game. So that's just something that I've just kind of contemplated with, because I used to be afraid to share, not afraid, but I used to be like, oh, what are people going to think of me? Because really I've found that people don't really get judged when they come from like, I did all of the like frat boy type things. It's like,
yeah. I get it.
You did that. That's just a phase in your life. But I feel like sometimes people in the even the spiritual community, will judge people that played video games.
Oh man, I grew up playing video games. I still love video games. And
and I actually did that professionally for a little bit.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that's a little bit of my background. And I've always really enjoyed sports. I grew up playing tennis. It wasn't at like this really high rich school. We were like the lowest division. There were barely enough players to play. We barely got to play. But I grew up not in like the most ideal circumstances, but it was a catalyst. Like I remember one winter we ran out of heat for the house. We didn't have enough money to pay for the heating. So my parents were divorced, and they were nasty divorce. And I kind of grew up going back and forth, and they just hated each other. So that's kind of what I saw in relationships growing up. And I feel like it's just important to see at this point for everyone watching that you're just going to keep uncovering things. And it's not really about healing to me. And just on a side note, I just wanted to, this is coming to me. I don't really vibe with healing. I'm not really a guy that says, in terms of when it comes to ego, you're not healing your body. You could, yes, your body might be toxic, detoxing, yes. But when we think about these, like, I think that you might have experience with this from your hypnotizing and stuff like this, inner child, and a lot of people call that inner child healing.
Yep.
I would say that healing is true to the respect that when you expose the falsehood, it automatically heals.
Yes.
But I would say, to me, I don't see myself as constantly healing. I see myself as whole and exposing the reasons when I realize that I think, or my mind thinks, it's not me, but my mind thinks that I'm not whole. I'm exposing that. So I see self-realization in general as exposing the reasons as to why you believe you're not this, but you are already healed inherently.
And that's, I mean, I love the way you put that, because it is what happens in this work. Healing, I think, is just an easy word to choose. But
I see some people in the chat that said, I still play WoW.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. And
I love it.
But it is good, because that's what we realize really quickly. Like I work with the guides a lot. Okay. And that is always the message. We're remembering that we are already everything that we need to be. And we are already that. And like you said, there's some programming, conditioning, and falsehoods, like you said, and some trauma, but you're absolutely right. And I love the way you put that. I've never heard it that way. Put that way.
It's just something that I've came to my own conclusions on. And if you want to think about that from a law of one perspective, you could interpret them saying everything is only identity. What you're doing is you're removing the layers of identity.
Yeah.
So it's like you just keep taking stuff off. And it's not that you were like something was wrong with you all the way underneath all the layers. It's that the layers are just heavy. And then when this is what happens. Then when the layers get heavy, when it becomes hard to do things because you're just constantly getting all that crap on, you have that crap on you. What happens is then you do things that you feel like you did wrong, and it was because of the weight. Now, I'm not saying you blame it, because you're not a victim to it.
Nope.
But in a sense, it's as though when you see that the reason why you did this was because you believe this, not because there was something wrong with you. You thought that this was the best thing to do.
Right.
Then you're like, oh, well, I'm not healing me as a being, as an entity, or as the creator, whatever you want to say. And I'm not saying that I'm a god. I'm saying that I'm God and everyone else is as well. The same amount of it. Yes. Especially as you're a human. Because I think that's really a really good distinction to make. Here's the difference between ego and self-realization. Ego, well, let's start with self-realization, okay? Self-realization is when you realize I am God, but so is everyone else.
So is everyone else.
And if you leave out the so is everyone else, then you do stuff where you realize that's straight what you could call ego.
Right.
Because that's what people, that's the service to self. When you say I am this, but no one else is, because the way that the service to self in the Orion group works, and even fourth density negative, because you can negatively ascend, by the way. So how fourth density works is, if you've seen the movie Chronicles of Riddick, and it was just called Riddick, a movie called Riddick with Vin Diesel.
Yep.
That movie is straight up service to self. It's a hierarchy, and basically all the service to self beings are just waiting to just get at that person, to just get up to the top, to just take the person down that's ahead of them so they can be the leader. And so if you want to see a service to self example, go watch Riddick, because I watched that with some people back in the day, and I'm like, oh my, this is exactly what the law of one says. It's crazy. So
the Orion group, is this a fourth density negative? Where do they kind of
They got troops everywhere.
Right. And so why has this, so they've been
They got
around.
here. Let me. I'm sorry. Let me go a little bit deeper than that.
Sure.
They're in third density, fourth density, and fifth density, and in sixth density. But sixth density, you can't move forward once you enter sixth density unless you drop polarity. So it basically originates, you could say, in fifth density. You could think about it like if Palpatine in Star Wars got offed and then he was basically a negative force ghost to us. If you've watched Star Wars, that's what it would be. There's like at the very top, there's a leader that people I just got to say real quick, people on our planet think that there's certain groups that are influencing everything. Oh yeah, there is, but keep going. Keep going. We're not even talking just third density. No. We got to keep going, like multiple layers of reality to find the source of this. And so while it is true that there's power structures, the power structures go very, very, very deep. And so the fourth density really they interfere with telepathy. That's how they interfere. Mm-hmm. And that's why you see all the distortion that you do because of that.
So let's touch on telepathy and the distortion there and some channelers, because we talked about, we got to, using your discernment. There's a lot of spiritual content out there, a lot of bullshit out there, like anything.
Yeah.
How can you, if you decide, okay, you're going to explore that realm, because a lot of my clients channel, a lot of friends of mine are channels, I've channeled. How do you know? Because for me, I know how I know when I'm channeling. That is something. How do you know? It's a vibration. It's a vibration. It's a feeling.
And how do you think somebody who is new at this would be able to tell that?
I think everybody's so unique on how they receive information and how because I'm a feeler. I know some people are more visual and some people have different senses that are heightened in these states. Different faculties are open. I just know me and I know some of my clients, but I don't know how to properly guide someone unless I know how they experience fully. So for me, it was a trial and error thing. I've had some moments that freak me out. I've had some moments of fear, but then I really realized that the only thing that fuels these lower density beings is fear. Really, all it is that vibration of fear. It's not at all that they have a hold of you or anything like that. I realized that quickly. But we can do a whole other podcast on that. But for me, it's a vibration. It's a feeling. I know. And that's something that comes, I think, with experience. And yeah, but what would you say? Like, do you know how someone would know if they don't know? Or is that just something they have to?
That's a tough question for me because I don't really do it myself. I've never one that's experimented with channeling. I've never really felt like I wanted to.
Right.
So for me to be able to discern, I mean, I guess I could just say in my own life how I discern when I'm getting positive or negative messages in general. And it would just be to really, in a general sense, what is the gist of what they're saying? What's the agenda of what's even coming into my mind?
Is this coming from a place of love?
Yes. And that's such a, I don't even know if I can answer that even further because there's an infinite amount of ways that people could feel, an infinite amount of different situations and scenarios where different things could be happening. I guess for you to, I don't want to come to conclusions myself on this, but what I would say is just as general advice, be in a state of, I don't know, but I'm still even going to have discernment for what I receive.
Mm-hmm.
And what you receive isn't necessarily true from your mind, from even in your life and from things outside of you. As long as we are able to realize, as you said, there's a lot of BS, and that can even come from your own mind. You got to have it goes that deep. Not only have discernment for what other people are saying, and if you're exploring different channelings and things like that in books, have discernment for that, but also have discernment for what's coming to you. Because I'll get thoughts like there are thoughts that are coming to me right now that I'm literally taking a moment to pause before I speak, because I'm following through with that thought, like that thought, and I'm saying to myself, well, that's not actually. I'm doing it so fast because I've been doing it for a long time. I've been analyzing my own thoughts, that I would rather take a second to pause than to say something that I don't really mean or I haven't explored in that sense. But you also can know when you're in that flow state. Like, I think for a lot of the podcasts before this question, I was in a flow state to where it was just coming to me.
Right.
Some people call that channeling.
Yeah.
Some people would say that that's just you're in a flow state. You can name it whatever you want, but you can tell when you're in tune. Also, this is just something to know in general. Throughout this podcast, I've felt electricity, a state of bliss, just kind of come to me in very small increments. Like, I'll say something, and then and I'm not saying I'm some enlightened guru or master. This can happen to literally anybody. I'm just so aligned in that moment, not by any means of my own, but with my intention to serve others, which is you watching. That you just get a little bit of bliss. It feels like, it really feels like when you listen to if you don't know what I'm talking about, when you listen to really good music, this is the way that people get introduced to this feeling. You have this feeling of electricity, and it comes down your spine, and that's because your spine is transducers. Your energy centers are transducers for energy, and we can go into the Kundalini and how that goes up and all that, but essentially your body is electric, and when you're aligned, you get those tingles. And when somebody brings you into alignment, you also get those, like music,
Brother, my last show had my brother, my friend Michael on, and we call them the zings. They'll be in the middle of a conversation. I'll be just in that flow. I'll be, even sometimes before I say it, just that perfect chill down the spine. And or just after you say something that resonated with someone, or like you said, you don't really know what it is, but it's that aligned information. And you're absolutely right. And there's nothing quite like that, because when you discover it,
oh man, it's a feeling, and you can't explain it, and people are going to say that it doesn't exist until they experience it.
And then they're going to start to see, like, the first time you're like, oh wait, that came right at the time, right at the moment I said something from my heart, or I said something that meant something to me, or to help someone. And then it happens the second time, and you're like, oh, there's something here. Yeah. And now you just can't deny it. It's one of the best, most beautiful moments we get to have every day.
Yeah, you're basically tapping into a really high level of frequency, and when you do that, you have that little moment. And I just like to bring into everyone's mind that could be, you could live in that state if you are committed to the straight and narrow path enough. That could be where you live from. Now, I'm not saying that I am, because I'm not.
Right. No.
But it's possible to, when you are more aligned with just being open and being in harmony and helping others, which helping others is polarization in itself. And, from one perspective, you could even think that when you're helping others and when you're giving service to others, or others are giving you that polarization, you feel it. You might actually, that's what you could say the tingles are, in a sense. Who knows? But like somebody said in the chat, ring in the ears, or the zing's a wonderful feeling of yeah, exactly.
It's the wonderful feeling of confirmation. It's so well put, because that's what it is for me. Because sometimes, I think that's when some of my best channeling is when I'm just having conversation. And it happens a lot in my lives, and probably the same with you, when you're just in that. And then you'll say something, well, you know what? I think blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh yeah, no, that's what it is. It's confirmation for me, almost 9 times out of 10. It's confirmation of what I feel, or what I'm about to say, or what I'm saying. And there's nothing quite like it.
For sure. For sure, man. And I see a comment. I was totally engulfed in the Stargate series. Stargate has probably some of the most disclosure out there. There's, if you want to, it's older now, but the whole Stargate series is a lot of stuff in there that there's so much truth in that one in particular, and a lot about the pineal gland. And I was going to make a video about that, and there is a specific, I'll probably make it within the next couple of days because it's crazy, but how the pineal gland works, and how there's water in the pineal gland, and when it moves a certain way, it's like a barrel of water, and there's crystals in there, and it's a transducer, and that when there was a trailer that came out for something in Star Wars that showed that. And by the time that a lot of people watch this, I might have it up, but I'm going to make a TikTok or an Instagram reel about it, that it literally happened in a show. And it also, there was many movies that there's a piece of technology. Okay, this is another rabbit hole, but I don't know how deep you want to go on this because we could talk about Project Looking Glass and what was in that stuff, and the Montauk chair, and how there's basically, how do I keep this simple? And there's this thing called the Orion Cube, for those that have heard of it. And I would have to make a TikTok for this to make sense, because you need visuals. So I'm just going to say, like, we're not even going to get into that right now, but let's just say that the pineal gland is a mini dimensional traveler. And you can experience the past, present, and future in that. And that happens when you use that transducer. You could say that it shields off gravity in a sense, and then when gravity is shielded off, you can enter time space.
Right.
And then in time space, you can access the past, present, and future. And that, again, that's a whole different thing that I could talk for an hour about, because you have to understand the history of what they found, what even is these projects that we're running. And
yeah, we can't go there today, Nick. We can't do that today. We just can't. But a few things I want to touch on before we're past the hour. So I want to just kind of start moving a different road here. The final two questions that I always ask. So there's two. They're not always comfortable. Nick, if you could give us something, maybe something you haven't shared before, something vulnerable, something open, that maybe about your struggles, about your life. If there's anything that you could share with us today that would bring people value, what would it be? It's a tough one.
I still struggle to this day with certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And that when I struggle with those things, it's really been beneficial. And I haven't shared this, but for people to understand that just because you're sharing and you're at a certain level of consciousness doesn't mean that you're not tempted. And it doesn't mean that you don't have things that you're still bringing to the light and you're still alchemizing. And that it doesn't take away from who you are if you still have things that you're dealing with. So, for example, I might distract myself on YouTube for 2 hours watching random things. And I used to really be hard on myself for that. Like really hard on myself, to where the point where it was just like straight guilt and I felt terrible. Like I got to help the world more. And now I'm at the point where, like, if it happens, I say to myself, like, I don't even go there anymore. So this is one of the most important life lessons that I've had, and it's relevant to me right now. When I have things that I do that I don't feel aligned with after them, I don't even guilt myself. I just say to myself, where did that start? Where was the starting point for that? What was the trigger to get me to agree to do that? And if I can honestly analyze my life and look at that event, which I feel like, oh, I did this wrong. If I can just take that wrong out and just say, what was that thing that I was like, yeah, I guess I can do this because what? What was that reason? And if I can really analyze that reason and realize that that reason wasn't acceptable for where I want to go and what I want to do, I could do it, and that it would be just a consequence, right? There's nothing wrong with doing things. I mean, of course, if you want to do service to self stuff or whatever you want to call it, that's your prerogative. And at this point, I'm like, I can't guilt myself for things. I'm not even going to call them mistakes, because if I can analyze it and say, what was the trigger? And can I learn from this? Like, honestly learn, not just like, I'm going to learn. No, really learn. Because if I can really say, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And if I can be honest with myself and say, you know what, you got to let that go. And sometimes it might come back again.
Yep.
Sometimes you might say, you know what, I want to let this go. And then again, the next day it happens.
Yeah, bro.
But if you can just say, I learned something from this and I'm actually improving. If you can improve literally 1% in 100 days, you'll be 100% better, right?
Dude, it hits me so hard because there are things in my life that same right now I'm continuously struggling with. I'm better at it. I'm better at seeing him. I'm better at, pivoting in those moments of weakness, whatever you want to call it. But I'm still at the point where I'm still judging myself. I still give myself a hard time. I'm pretty hard on myself to this day. Better, but I needed to hear it from you like that. It's good to know.
Yeah, and toxic masculinity will say you got to be hard on yourself because when you're hard on yourself, you progress.
No.
And I say to myself, what a way to live.
That beating yourself up, you want to lower your vibration even more. Keep doing that.
Yeah, to me, it's like you can live that way and you might accomplish a lot, but when you look back on your life, what will it be? And a struggle the entire time.
Right.
And so to me, it's like I can't keep guilting myself just to progress, because if you just use your intellect, you can learn from things and do them and see things in a positive light. And I feel like that's one thing that we're evolving beyond, these old traits of the way that humanity used to see things. And I think that's something that's not just in the in certain people. I think it's something in the collective consciousness that we are all addressing, and that might all come to us, that we need to be hard on ourselves, because that's what it kept us alive at some point. When we were hard on ourselves,
it served us.
We then didn't go back to the river where the crocodile ate our wife, right? But now we don't have the physical struggles, and we've transitioned from a physical world to a mental and spiritual world. It's not that they weren't that, just like when you move from second density to third density in the law of one, it said that in second density, you're a mind-body complex. You're not a mind-body-spirit complex, which is a soul. You're not that yet. And it's not because you didn't have a soul the entire time. It's because you didn't realize it. So when we have these things in our consciousness come up, a lot of times it's from the collective, and we're helping to move humanity on from this survival physical mindset, which we can still use and have that in our back pocket, know how to garden, do the things that we need to do to take care of ourselves, but we don't have to have the mental suffering and see things in that light, and we evolve together. And that's what we're doing,
Beautiful, brother. Last question. What's it mean to be alive for you? Like, what does it really mean to be alive for Nick?
What does it mean?
Yeah. What does being alive mean to you?
Well, can I ask a counter question? Just a little clarification.
Sure.
Is that on Earth? Or just in general?
In general.
Or existence? Because
damn, how many holes?
I need to know if you mean, what does it mean to exist, or what does it mean to be alive on Earth? Because those are two different answers.
Let's stick to Earth. Your human experience. What does it mean to be alive here?
What does it mean to be alive on Earth? There's always the cliche answer, which is coming to me, that's like, it's an opportunity.
Isn't it?
It's an opportunity to evolve. And I'm like, yeah. But I would say it's an adventure. To say that. It's a beautiful symphony of consciousness, of light, you could say, of resonance. And I see it like when I'm listening to music and I hear flat notes in very dramatic music, let's say orchestral, music. A lot of people, that's what we would consider to be negative on our planet and in general for us. But the more that I evolve, and at this point in my life, I have a very different answer to this question than I would have. But to be alive, it's to witness and experience the beauty and straight awe of realizing what you really are. Because when you realize what you really are in our space-time, it's unique. It's immaculate. It's beautiful because you didn't know it. And when you're outside of this, when you're outside of all this drama, you know it. So you're playing a game and you know the answer. In this game, you're literally don't know the answer, and that's the adventure. Really adventure. That's the
God, yeah,
that's right. The beauty is that you don't know the answer. A lot of people think that it's bad to not know, but I would say when you look out from this world, it's actually the most exciting thing that you can experience to not know and then figure out, oh, I am connected to everything. I am love. I am light. I am the one infinite creator in a holographic universe that is experiencing itself. I'm that wave that's coming up, and I'm looking at the rest, and I'm trying to decipher what is this. And whether I figure it out or not, it is what it is, because I'm going to come back up eventually as in another body, in another form. So if I can just take it as an adventure, then it is. Okay.
I love it. Thank you, brother. So tell everybody where they can find you. What's going on? You got a book coming. What else you got going on?
Right now, I spend most of my days writing my book because it's the most passionate, most incredible thing, most difficult thing, but rewarding thing. I'm sure it will be eventually. It doesn't necessarily feel like it right now, but eventually it will be rewarding.
Yeah, it will.
And it is. I'm just joking, but that's what I spend most of my time doing. And other than that, I try to put out a video a day, some sort of short form content, because that's just what society wants right now. Eventually I really started on YouTube, and I would love to get back into YouTube. And I am. I'm putting up my own podcast episodes. I'm going to have an episode with Carehart, for those that know her, singer-songwriter. This weekend, I'm going to go to North Carolina. I don't know if you've been to North Carolina.
I have not.
But apparently Asheville is like the crystal quartz bed of like the United States. So I'm going to go out there and just hang out with her and film my own podcast. It's going to be great. I would love to have you on eventually on that too.
Man, I'd be on.
But that's what I'm doing. And I'm just making short form stuff on TikTok. You can find me on TikTok, Instagram right now. So many people are telling me they want longer videos, but I just don't have the time with the book, because it's like I can't do long form and the book at the same time, because it's just a lot of time. So eventually here in the next couple of months, I'm sure I'll do more long form besides the podcast that I do. I'll do more like breakdowns, and I've done a lot of Law of One stuff. So if you're interested more in the Law of One and breakdowns, I have my own stuff. I'm sure you'll be able to find in the links of this podcast somewhere where you can. I just basically try to put the Law of One in easy terms to understand, starting with what the heck is the Law of One. So the very beginning, but I didn't cover it all. You'll never be able to cover it all. So I'm just out here. I don't know anything. I'm just exploring.
I love it. I love it. All I know for sure is I know nothing for sure, and we're just here having fun. So
exactly. That's such a beautiful place to be, man, because it's the people that think they know that actually don't know. And I'm just like, man, I don't know anything, but I'm just looking. I'm just looking, just exploring, and things that seem to have a lot of evidence. That's what I explore. And
cool.
We'll talk more again, I'm sure.
We'll have you on again. Absolutely. Thanks for coming on, man. Thank you so much for your knowledge, your rabbit holes. I'm going to be going down a few of those now. I know that. So it's just Nick Zei on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all the social, all the same tag, or tag, what is it? Name?
I think it's tag. You can find me on the platform stuff. You can find me. Yeah.
Metaverse.
Nah, man, I'm not into that sauce. I'm not. But it's nick.zei on all platforms. And, you can throw my link tree down below or something. I can send that to you and people can find me or whatever. And you can pre-order my book probably in the next couple weeks. I'll be done. So you can find the book. It'll be on Amazon eventually, whenever you see this. So
I love it. Awesome.
All right, man. It's an honor and it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you guys next week.
Peace.